Hello and welcome to the CX Files podcast. I'm your host, Mark Hillary. Before starting this week, I'd like to say Happy New Year to all the listeners and welcome to 2020. To open this year, I talked to Gary Slade, the UK and South Africa Chief Executive of Teleperformance. Gary's been in this industry for over 30 years now, giving him a huge amount of insight. After we finished the recording, he actually said to me that even though he's had a long career in CX, this period right now is the most exciting of all. Gary was General Manager for Europe at Concentrix before joining Teleperformance earlier this year, and he's also held senior positions at IBM and Citel. The interview's focused on 2020 and the year ahead, but some of the subjects we cover include work at home, innovation, offshoring and data security. Gary's telephone is a bit crackly during the first question, but it gets better, so hang in there for this one, okay? Let's go straight to the interview with Gary Slade. Okay, Gary, thanks for being the first guest on the podcast this year. First, could we just take a look back at 2019 and perhaps some of the trends or changes in the industry, maybe some of the most interesting aspects of working in CX in 2019?
Yeah, for sure, and thanks for having me. I think the first thing I'd say is there was certainly a enthusiasm for clients to challenge the status quo. And, you know, as business gets under increasing pressure, there's more acceptance to doing things in a different way. Be that, you know, one of the examples, I call it NPS Plus. And this is where clients say, look, we've got NPS, we've got a level of improvement, but it's flatlined. How do we move our customer engagement further? So when we've taken a look at that particular subject, we've been spending a lot of time talking about customer effort. We've all used these new channels where you say, actually, I want to ring somebody, where's the phone number? It's embedded in so many different places, and it's difficult to get hold of a number or a contact point. The FAQs may not be up to speed. So actually taking NPS and not replacing it with customer effort, but actually enhancing it with another customer effort quotient allows you to get a dual perspective on a particular problem. And, you know, some companies might, you know, yes, I'm going to recommend you, but you're a bit of a pain to deal with. Actually, you need to know that because sooner or later I'm not going to recommend you. So I think that was one thing we saw. And we also saw, I would say, a more balanced view on shoring location. And probably, I've been in the industry for a number of years now, probably the most mature approach to, okay, what work goes where? And why should I put this work here, and why should I put this work somewhere else? And that's been quite exciting. And then, dare I say, of course, technology. The good news is I don't think anyone's got the answer to technology completely, and I think the bad news is no one's got it as well. And certainly our approach of high tech and high touch held together with Six Sigma is resonating well with clients because there is absolutely the place for people in any interaction. So yes, the technology is there, but it should be an enabler to great experience as opposed to replacement of a customer experience. So as I say, great dialogue, much mature, much more open in terms of what the art of the possible is.
Okay, that's great. I mean, one of the things I observed in the past year was work at home and how work at home agents became really a big trend. You know, all of the company, yourselves and your rivals, were all talking about this. So is that an area you're going to be expanding on in 2020?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, last year we saw some quite positive gains in that particular area, where clients are now comfortable that the technology and the security is there. It's always been a big challenge. But as I mentioned earlier, this more broad, mature look at sourcing. For me, work at home is the next natural step in contact centres. It gives you access to phenomenally loyal and phenomenally experienced people who are not geographically constrained. You know, we may have somebody in the Outer Hebrides who's perfect for the job. We don't need them to come into an office. We don't need them to sit on a train or a bus or drive or walk to work. They can do it from their lounge. And I think it's very exciting. We're looking, very positive in that area. We are one of the largest in the market for work-at-home agents, and we see that expanding and increasing as clients look to get that sort of edge built in terms of finding the number one resource they need, which is talented individuals.
Yeah. So you no longer need to just recruit from people who can possibly commute to the centre anymore.
Absolutely. I mean, it opens up. Labour pool becomes a non-geographic, and I think that is very exciting. I and my competitors, and also in-house, we all struggle with hiring a number of people, and maintaining those people, etc. And when you look at the travel to work time, it's typically 20 to 30 minutes maximum for frontline agents. Unless you're offshore, it's typically a lot longer for logistics reasons rather than distance. But actually being able to work from home, I think, gives you that access to people. It's also great work-life balance for the individuals. It means I can have a job, and actually I can fit that job around me. And, I can, drop the kids off at school, or I can, do some studies, or whatever it may be that you wish to do as an individual. You can do that and also have a flourishing career in a contact centre business. Okay.
I was recently invited out to California to see the new Teleperformance Innovation Experience Center. It just opened in Silicon Valley. And I saw there that content moderation has become a very big trend for your company and others in this industry. But how does that work? I mean, how do you sort of arrange a partnership with the social media companies over what content should be moderated?
Sure. I mean, firstly, thanks for coming out to see us at the TIEC. I hope you enjoyed it. It's pretty spectacular. I've been fortunate enough to go there 2 or 3 times. Content moderation we see as a much underinvested area. Increasingly, us as consumers, we look to get potentially recommendations and referrals by looking at the internet, to looking at content there. You've also got, unfortunately, some levels of abusive content, and all of that needs to be maintained. We saw recently there's been a number of high-profile examples where, misbehaviour, for want of a phrase, on social media has caused ripples through an organisation. And I think it's critical that, as a company, you own that, and you own what's being said about your company, or actually what's being said about others using your company as a platform for that. So, I don't think any longer you can just sit and say, well, we can't control that. So content moderation for me is likely to get harder and more. There's going to be certainly a lot more of it. And I think you've got a balance between, this is where technology can make a play. So, technology using text analytics will allow you to do an awful lot of the mechanical work on content moderation, and then move over to agents to do the moderation in a prioritized way. Okay. We also have to take the care, particularly for the abusive content moderation, we have to look after our staff, because some of the things that we are asking them to look at, review and amend or delete are very unpleasant. So there's an element of care that we have to provide that we probably typically haven't had to deal with on voice to the level of extent. But content moderation is great. It's a global business. So typically, when we work with our clients, and a lot of those clients are social media platforms themselves, we don't need to do it in a particular location. We can do it across the piece, and that way. So having those hubs and centres of excellence to do that.
Does that actually give you an advantage then? Because I would guess that content moderation is quite an interesting kind of regional business. I mean, what needs to be moderated in India or China must be different to the USA.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's levels and degrees of, Mark. I think, so there's the majority of it's a bit like the Pareto rule. 80% of it, is reasonably simple to deal with, and then you've got the complexity. What you don't need is to replicate that whole infrastructure in every location. But you're right, there are some cultural nuances. I would say, however, on the abusive side, it can be on occasion, it can be pretty black and white. So I don't think culturally there's some things are tolerated versus they're not. And actually, when you look at some of the travel websites where people go to find recommendations of where to go, it is important for their integrity in the business that people go and trust them, that actually, the content is validated in some shape or form. And it's not just, the owner's auntie, if you will, just doing lots of recommends, being here, it's fantastic.
Okay, that's interesting. You mentioned in your introduction about a more mature attitude towards offshoring and globalization of customer service. But I know about a decade ago, offshoring had a really bad reputation, and we were seeing a lot of companies gaining an advantage in their market by really openly talking about how they only have customer service locally in the UK. I mean, has that all changed now? Are we genuinely seeing a sort of a more mature attitude to how this work is distributed?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, I, for one, have, there's always been a lot of discussion around organisations bringing work back onshore, and there tends to be a big fanfare about that. However, if you look at the offshore locations, they have continually grown year on year. So maybe for every one that comes back, two or three have gone over. So I think, one has to take that with a level of suspicion, if you will. When we look at the shoring strategy, we're now working very heavily with clients as to what type of work, what type of customer, what type of transaction should go to what location. I mean, for sure, back office, simplistic programs, very sensibly would go to India. You want the lowest cost of processing that. And actually, not only that, India has extended its skill set, and certainly for ourselves, being and transforming ourselves in a digital integrated business services company, India is, if you like, our centre of automating those simplistic processes. So quite a change in behaviour in terms of we've got the work, now can we reduce the work? Philippines, South Africa, we're seeing huge growth there for customer service, collection, sales type activities, and that's going well. And onshore still has its place to play, but when I talk to clients these days, we're talking around a balanced portfolio. You add work at home into that, as a CX executive, you now have a range of levers to pull, depending whether cost is important to you, flexibility and resources. Unfortunately, there is no location that gives you everything, so therefore having those various things available to you is very helpful. But we're certainly seeing it improve from there. But when we sit down with clients and talk about the options and what they're trying to achieve, and I think that's the difference. We now are having dialogue where it's, this is what I'm trying to achieve, not, can you reduce cost by 10% or can you move 200 heads here? It's, I'm trying to reduce my total cost of ownership by this and at the same time improve my customer engagement and so on and so forth. And that's a much more exciting problem to have than can I have another 200 people here, please?
Yeah, that's interesting. And just, maybe it's a bit off-piste, but do you think that that's because the industry itself has become so much more complex in the past decade or so? We saw the introduction of all the social channels, but now we're seeing customers demanding a sort of omni-channel where, no matter which channel you're using, it all works just as well. And so, a company like your own actually ends up becoming more of a partner rather than a supplier.
Yeah, absolutely. I think certainly for outsourcers to survive, you have to be more focused on your clients' challenges than your own. I think if you focus on your own, then you'll probably be out of business relatively soon. But when you look at the end users, they are materially more demanding. The loyalty that you had maybe 20, 30 years ago that you could rely on no longer exists. Your loyalty is predominantly the last transaction you've had, rather than I've been with the bank for 30 years, I don't move, my parents were there, and so on and so forth. So you are seeing demanding customers. We've given them a whole new suite of channels to play with, which gives a lot of choice to the customer, but a lot of complexity at the back end, because customer says, oh, that chat didn't work, I now need to speak to someone, I couldn't get it on the email, I need to chat with. So you've got to be able to move the history of that transaction. If you want to be best in class, you need to be able to move that transaction so the customer doesn't have to repeat themselves. I was looking towards something this morning, and it took me 15 minutes to find the phone number. And whilst that doesn't seem a lot, actually, the transaction itself took 3 minutes. So going back to my earlier point about customer effort, I would say, would I recommend them? I think the product's great. I think the way they made me work that hard was pretty dumb. Yeah. Because it shouldn't have been that hard. And it's not something I could have done in email because I needed to order something that needed to come today. So clients are more demanding, channels are more complex, and from an outsourcer, we have to be a partner. We have to be agnostic as to where the traffic goes. we can't sit and say, I only want to deal with voice. Otherwise, again, we would be out of business, and chat, is exciting. And I think there's very few companies doing it really well. There's a lot of companies trying to do it really well. And there are some, I'm afraid to say, have just put it in because they feel they can tick a box and say, we have chat.
Yeah. Okay, well, I mean, it's the beginning of the new year. What are your clients talking to you about for 2020? I mean, what sort of trends or changes in the industry should we be looking out for?
Very good question. So I've been fortunate enough to have a number of meetings with clients at a very senior level talking about the challenges for next year. And I'd say, I typically say what keeps you awake at night. So one is security. And even though we may be an outsourced partner, we have to have the same level, if not a higher level of security confidence. We give them a high level of security confidence. So, that we spend a lot of time and effort on that to make sure that we are as good, if not better, than our clients. So I think security is one. They're talking a lot about that. How do they maintain it? Organizations are recognizing that they're going down a route where potentially we are all automating the simple stuff. And actually, we're either automating it, removing it, or customers are doing it through self-serve. That is leaving a level of complexity that's never been seen before. And so, how do we upskill our frontline staff to be able to deal with that level of complexity for the full shift, if you will, rather than interspersed with easier stuff? So, security is one, complexity is the other. There is a lot of pressure, certainly for some of the industries, from the regulators, which are causing some anxieties. And actually, we're seeing a trend of some of the targets and objectives we're being set are almost counterintuitive in terms of customer engagement. It's almost very much old school in terms of line adherence. But I understand why, but it's moving away from actually doing a great service to a customer because they're dealing with a regulator. And then cost. I'm afraid to say organizations are increasingly under pressure for cost, and customer service business is a big ticket item, so we all get looked at very, very quickly. I have a number of clients last year and actually going to this year are asking us to be creative about how we can lower the prices faster than maybe a technology or assurance strategy would drive.
Thanks for listening to the CX Files podcast. Please take a moment to review the podcast because this helps other listeners to find it. And if you have any suggestions, then get in touch with me on Twitter or LinkedIn. I'm @Mark Hillary with 2 L's, or just search Google for Mark Hillary.